The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And back with me is Pastor Nick. We're continuing our discussion from yesterday as we started to look in Psalm 49. So if you missed that, you might want to go back and listen to the episode from yesterday. Also, you can go to shepnaz.org/media if you missed his message from Sunday and hear the whole message in its entirety. But today we're going to get back into this discussion. Yesterday we talked a little bit about how Psalm 49 maybe is not the most upbeat instruction that we get, but it is also one that is very important for us to look at. And Nick was led by the Lord to give us this message. Even though he may not have really wanted to be his first choice.
No, I tried to get out of it several times. I even would go to Cheney, my wife, for those that don't know. I'd say like, oh, you know, I don't want to do this one. I want to switch. And Cheney would just encourage me like, well, then you just need to keep going. Like especially if you're trying to get away from it and you can't, like you just need to keep going. So.
Well, and that's probably, it won't be today, but that's probably a whole nother podcast episode in and of itself, is the mechanics of how the Lord leads you or any pastor in what is the message I have for you to share today. And for some on the outside looking in, that probably seems very foreign to the idea of like, you know, if I was doing a book report for school and I had to read this book and then give the book, there would be nothing in me that would be saying, you know, you really shouldn't be writing the report about this book. You should be writing the report about something else. But somehow, maybe just spend a couple minutes, talk us through that process of how when you're looking into a word, how it is that you just feel like, nah, that's not what. The difference in how it feels and the confirmation that you get when you're going the right direction.
I mean, it's different every time, in a lot of different ways, but there's a general sense of like, as you're exploring, especially if you have options, like we were given the option for this sermon series, Summer in the Psalms, pick a psalm. I'm like, all right, sweet.
Right.
All right. You got, 150 of them to choose from. And so other times there's more specific where you're, let's say, working through either a specific verse by verse, chapter by chapter, or in order of, like, I think the one we did on the Sermon on the Mount, where you're going through maybe like the Beatitudes, like you just go through and like, all right. But other times, like in this instance, where you're just thinking, okay, God, what is it that you have for me and for this group of people, for everyone who will hear this? What I started with was just flipping through, reading the Psalms, just like, all right, God, what's lead me to where you want us to be, and it's coming up with honestly, before I got to 49, I had picked out 51, and then come find out like, oh, Rob's doing that one. Like, oh no. So I was like, all right, well, so let's, God, what is it that you have? And actually leading up to where I had decided on Psalm 51, Psalm 49 was 49, right. I'm reading them in order. I was like, oh, okay. All right. And then I got to 51. I'm like, oh, 51's way better. Let's do that. Even though it's in its own way, like it's pretty heavy too, of, just confession and, but there's a lot more, I don't know.
There seems to be more, of a grace picture and redemption in 51. It's an easier preach.
So, I'm like, all right. So that was in the back of my mind, like, 49 initially. And then once come back, like, all right, well, and how I kind of knew like that one just jumped. I don't really know how to explain it too much for maybe those listening to understand, but there's just something that you connect with, like that stands out, like really, maybe just jumps out to you like, oh yeah, that's something that is a reality and people need to hear or people need to think about, or and so those were a couple of the initial ways like God was leading me toward that, I believe. And then as we got into it a little bit, some of the illustrations I shared in the message started coming to like, oh, this is the picture of this. This is what it looks like in real life or real life application, or and so you just start kind of hearing some of the truth and how people can relate to that in different ways. And so it just really grows in that way. And then when you try to get away from it, it's like, I don't, maybe do something else a little bit. I wasn't at peace with the other possible passages, and so that's how I knew, like, all right, 49.
And maybe this analogy will work, maybe it won't. You can tell me. If not, that's fine. I can just erase it.
Okay.
But I think of it in terms of when my wife was pregnant. And at the end of the pregnancy, there's these kind of fake contractions. I think they're called Braxton Hicks. I'm not sure. I always used to get that wrong. And eventually...
You'll probably get yelled at by someone by saying fake.
Yes. I'm not saying they aren't painful.
Yeah, that's a
Let
good
me just say that. I'm just saying they're not leading.
Look out! No one.
They're not leading to childbirth.
Right. I knew what you meant,
but I would get I get the name messed up all the time, to the point where I just called them Briggs and Stratton because that was a name I could remember. You got the Briggs and Stratton contractions. But the thing was, how would you know the difference between what was real and what wasn't?
Mm-hmm. And I'm tracking with you.
I would tell Susan, I said, well, the difference is the real ones won't go away. Mm-hmm. If that's what, so as you're kind of giving birth to the sermon, a lot of times I feel like maybe if you're just kind of going in your own strength and like, oh, this sounds good, and you're pursuing that, like eventually it dies on the vine because it's not being pushed by the Spirit. It's not, you don't have that. That's where I want you to go. Yes, keep going. I'm encouraging you. Whereas when you get onto Psalm 49, and that's the message that the Lord had for you, it's like, okay, these contractions aren't going away. Right.
All right.
We're giving birth to this one because it's coming for real now.
Yeah, no, that's
so.
I think that works.
There you go.
You leave that in, Joe.
All right, I'll leave it in then. So we started to share yesterday some of the actual verses of Psalm 49. So let's jump in a little bit to some of your commentary on that.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the psalm initially, while there's a lot of you will die, this is death, results in. I mean, there's a lot of that language, and it's strong, and we certainly, I think that's why we like to not even think about it. I mean, because of the sensitive nature of just that whole topic and area. But, and this was kind of what we brought out in the message, like we have to allow ourselves to go there, to be, it's a very sobering thought, and it's a very, you have to allow yourself to go to the depths, to then to sense the hopelessness of that, right? Mm-hmm. For then when we present the hope, it's even all that much more like, wow. And so that's hopefully what everyone left with is that hope. But even but before we get to that we have to wrestle with some of these verses and just the bigger picture, because it is pretty a repetitive psalm. I mean, there's the thread that's all throughout, and what's the psalmist is doing is saying these people that have surrounded him as his enemies, or him they're boastful and their arrogance. He says, I'm not going to be afraid of them, because they boast about their riches and great riches and wealth, and they think that because of their fame and fortune, they think they have the upper hand, but he's like, I'm not going to be afraid of them, because what they are all about, what they kind of have built themselves up and pride themselves on, doesn't matter, because the wise man, the fool, the rich, the poor, all are headed towards the same. And that's what I mentioned in the message, like death is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you are, where you've been, what you have, what you don't have. Death finds us all. Like, so to think whatever you have puts you at an advantage, it may be in some ways of the world it does, but when it comes to this, it doesn't matter. And so that's what he's bringing out. He's bringing out like that reality, that fame and fortune, these things that some people hold in high regard. They don't really carry much weight, and they won't do much good when it comes to this. Like, because that's what the psalmist says. Like, it doesn't matter. You can't take it with you. You can't avoid it. You can't buy your way out of this reality, what you're headed toward. Did you want me to read through some of these verses? Or,
sure.
Like verse 6, they trust in their wealth, boast of great riches. They cannot redeem themselves from death by paying a ransom to God. In verse 11, they name their estates after themselves, but their fame will not last. They will die just like the animals. So he's comparing us, the psalmist is, to to the beasts, to the animals. Like, you're going to end up in the ground just like everyone else and everything else. And verse 16, 17, so don't be dismayed when the wicked grow rich and their homes become ever more splendid. For when they die, they take nothing with them. Their wealth will not follow them into the grave. Verse 18, in this life, they consider themselves fortunate and are applauded for their success, but they will die like all before them. In verse 20, people who boast of their wealth, they don't understand. Because if they did understand, they wouldn't be boasting about it. They'd say, I realize. They wouldn't be like, oh, this is all that and I'm important, or this is great. They wouldn't do that because they understand this does nothing for the real issue, for the real equalizer that everyone must take on, must have a face-off with. And it says they will die just like animals.
You know, as you were sharing that story, I was thinking recently in the news, this is not a commentary on his personal life because I don't know anything about his personal life, but I was thinking of the actor Gene Hackman and how, probably one of he had several famous roles throughout his career as an actor, one of which probably is coming more to mind because of the new Superman movie coming out, but he played Lex Luthor in the original Superman movie back in the 70s. And he was in some great, Western movies and things, and did action movies and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, he just kind of goes by the wayside. He retires, and then you hear on the news, Gene Hackman was discovered dead in his home at 95 years old on the floor, and it appears that he had been there for several days and no one knew. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking as you were reading through these scriptures, and I'm not putting on him any of the things about, because like I said, I don't know him personally or anything about him personally, but I was thinking he was a very well-to-do man, and I'm sure he was in probably an incredible home at the time, but he passed and no one even knew at the time. And just that great equalizer, like what you're talking about. Yeah.
Let me throw this name out there, Joe, and tell me if you know, and maybe, you're a very knowledgeable person, so maybe you do know this name. Mansa Musa.
I do not.
You don't know? Okay. So in preparation, you don't know Mansa?
Nope.
But in preparation for this message, I looked up, who's considered like the person of the greatest wealth ever. Mansa Musa is that person. I think he's from like the 13th century. but he's considered like the of the Mali Empire. I'm just looking him up here on my computer. He's considered like the world's richest man in history. Was wealthier than any billionaire today. Around 1300s. 13 died in 1337. And I would be, if you are listening and you knew the name Mansa Musa, let us know. But most of us
Right.
have no clue of the richest person perhaps ever in the history. You don't even know, right? So that just goes, it just kind of contributes to what you were saying. Like, I don't know, like maybe at the time it might mean a lot to those around, but I mean, in the grand scheme, I don't even know where Mansa's buried or what's up, what's going on now. But it's just a very fame and fortune are fleeting. It's not something that if you are willing to boast about those things, the great what will humble you in light of that is the reality of death, the inevitability, unavoidable reality of death, because those things do nothing. And that's what the psalmist is bringing out. Like, you think you can, your fame and fortune can get you out of this? It can't. And what he's talking about here, and really what I think like the heart of the psalm is about, is what we mentioned in the message, like is what you are trusting in, what you are trusting in to do and to provide for you. If you are trusting in something to do and provide in something or someone in ways that they cannot do and cannot provide, like, you're a fool for that, right? You're a fool for thinking, oh, I'm really counting on this or that person or this thing. And everyone else, like, and the psalmist would call out, like, what are you doing? Like, that is of no benefit for this. And so you have to think a little bit more.
And he kind of finally, and in some ways, I think when he's kind of listing all this off, it draws the reader in. Like, okay, well, if that doesn't mean anything, if that doesn't mean anything, and that doesn't mean anything, then what does? And it prompts the question. And so then I think that's where he comes in with but for me.
Yeah, verse 15. There's our hope, okay, everyone?
But for me,
yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, verse 15 says, but as for me, God will redeem my life. He will snatch me from the power of the grave. And see, we want to, I mean, as Jesus people, like, we want to go straight for that, right? But I think we have to address and wrestle and acknowledge, like, oh yeah, this is am I living, and none of us probably listening are what we would say is like, we're rich, right? We're full of fame and fortune. Even though I would argue, like, if we're listening to this, what are you listening on? You're richer than most of the rest of the world.
Right.
Okay. But I think even more so is wrestling with, like, are we trusting in things or people to do what only God can do and what only God can provide? In this example, it's to redeem from the grave, like to give hope beyond death. But there's other ways too. I think we do that, and maybe some subtle ways that, okay, am I trusting in maybe not in my wealth or great riches to get me out of death, but am I trusting in maybe my job for meaning and purpose, or for maybe my financials for like security, or other ways that we look to things other than God or people other than God to do what God is the only one can do. Everlasting joy, everlasting peace, life to the full. That's what Jesus, I came to give life and give life to the full. I think those are some of the things that we can wrestle with too, alongside of certainly what the psalm presents here. with this. So,
amen. Well, one of the things that I pulled from this is don't settle for second best. There's a lot of things in this world that may have some attraction, but what the psalmist is telling us is there's one thing that I can put my trust in, and that is the Lord. And that is going to be the thing that holds the test of time, and it's going to be the thing that lasts for eternity.
Amen.
So we encourage you to do that, and you can reach out to us by emailing podcast@shepnaz.org if that's a decision that you're making. In the meantime, check out everything at the church website at shepnaz.org. For Pastor Nick, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.